Good afternoon. I am not Adam Gordon from Candidate.ID. I am Scot McRae, who's the other co-founder of Candidate.ID. Thanks very much, everybody who's... that's
Corona days.
Yeah. Corona days, yeah. I asked them all to be quiet as well. But if you see people walking up and down behind us, it's because we're at home and I've got 4 kids here. So anyway, great to meet you, Mees. And thanks very much, for joining us. So this is like a follow-on from a conversation that you had with Adam at Talent Tech Rising in Amsterdam.
And TA Live, I think. Yeah.
TA Live. So you're the founder and CEO of MrWork, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about talent lead conversion. Okay, so talent lead generation, how you do it, and then what are the best ways from a conversion point of view through. So first of all, Adam's given me a whole kind of list of questions to ask you, but let's start with those, and then I'll be drilling you as well. But tell us a little bit about your CV, because you've got a really interesting background.
Well, I don't know about that. I studied leisure management, which is actually a study in the Netherlands. It's basically anything to do with what people do in their free time. And after that, I thought let's start real life and get a 9-to-5 job. But I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I went off and I was a holiday rep for a year on the Spanish Canary Islands. And after that, I thought, okay, I came back, should I do a serious job? And then yet again, I wasn't able to go into a 9-to-5 opportunity because I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I went traveling, and then I came back after a year after that. And then again, it sort of, seemed to me a really hard process to go through. So I actually became a freelance game tester and translator at Nintendo in Germany. I was there for a few years. I was actually a world champion Mario Kart for a really short time over there. And at the time, what I thought is why I couldn't bring myself to have sort of a normal 9-to-5 job. I thought it was because I was lazy. And I was not the only one. My parents definitely agreed with me at that time. But after a while, and after building a company for about 7 years now, I know that I'm definitely not lazy. But it was just that I really hated the whole process of going through, an application. And it was really one-sided, especially back then. This was late 2011, early 2012, where you really only could find jobs on job boards. And then, based on sort of the window dressing of a simple job description, you had to go to a company and go through a sort of an interview, get 10 minutes to ask a few questions. And based on those 10 minutes, you had to make a really big decision in your life, where you would devote 1/3 of your physical time and even more of your mental time to this company. And I just thought that was really one-sided. And I thought, that process should be more balanced. So that's how I actually came to the idea of MrWork. I started looking for information about the companies that I could find interesting jobs from on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook in those days. And I sort of, I came across a lot of information about culture, values, what kind of people work there, all that stuff. And that gave me a much better insight into those companies before I actually decided to apply there. From that idea, I started thinking, okay, it would be great if I could connect companies to their target audience via social media, where companies can actually zoom in on their candidates that are now maybe in another job. The passive candidates, it wasn't really a term back then, but it is now, of course. So not people that are actively looking, but people that might be passively looking for a job. To connect to those people, and the other way around, if I'm a person that thinks, maybe in 1 or 2 years I'm ready for the next step, it's good to have 2 or 3 companies top of mind where I think, okay, if I change jobs, those companies would be a good next step for me, a good culture fit, but also just a fit in general for the company. So
let's before we go too far forward, tell me a little bit about Mario Kart and what it's like to be a I mean, I know you probably get asked this all the time, but it's
I don't tell it that often, that story.
no, and what the kind of like the characteristics of what it takes to be a kind of like world Mario Kart champion, and how that how, because it's a fairly unconventional start, right? Which
Yeah.
but how that what how you think what you learned and the characteristics of what helped you achieve that, how that kind of has helped you with MrWork, let's say.
Well, obviously you need a lot of time. You need a lot of time to play a game and become world champion at. So that was the first thing that I obviously had working at Nintendo. But I think one of the things, obviously, you need to sort of tenacity to go around the track for 1,000 times and try to be 1/10 of a second faster than your last round. So I guess that would translate into entrepreneurship. I couldn't think of any more really qualities. I mean, good eye-hand coordination doesn't really come in handy with being an entrepreneur. But I think tenacity and just keeping going around the same track constantly and trying to improve little things here and there. I guess that sort of has some overlap.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit like the obstacle is the way. If you just keep chipping away at the obstacle, then you're going to find a way kind of through it. And I mean, we kind of speak the same language, or I think that the and a lot of this is kind of a lot of what underpins Candidate.ID from a kind of lead generation point of view is all of the efforts and activities that organizations do to get people interested in their opportunities in the jobs that they have and what they're hiring for and what they might be hiring for in the future. That, of course, stimulates some people to start an application process and apply, but that application process is really onerous. It's really it's big. The forms are big, but there's a lot of people who, as you say, are they're not they're not actively looking. Okay, they might be relatively happy where they are, but they're interested. You've got their attention. They like your kind of story. They like what you're trying to do as an organization, and they probably would be open to a conversation, provided you could see that. Provided that you could see that they'd gone away and read about some stuff. They'd started to read some of your content, engage with some of your content, and then had started to having looked at jobs, but they haven't applied. They might never apply, but they're a great fit and they're interested. Yeah. So we know that there's like 10 times as many people doing that as there are will ever apply. We speak we're speaking the same language. And so when you were the kind of the reasons for setting up MrWork were seeing that and looking at that from a personal point of view. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just found the whole, applying for a job process really frustrating. One of our goals, sub goals of MrWork is to actually sort of kill the traditional application, if you will, because we just believe that should be a process that's much more of a two-way street conversation rather than a selection process where one is clearly in the driver's seat and the other one is sort of selling themselves. It's much more two-way street, I think, nowadays.
Yeah, so I mean, talk to me about how with the clients that you work with. Talk to me about how that works. Talk to me, about the work that you do and how that kind of translates into applications and also translates into conversations and the result. First, let's talk about how it works with your clients.
Yeah, sure. So basically what we do is we enable companies to create personalized candidate journeys by basically running social media campaigns and Google campaigns and showing candidates the right content at the right time based on where they are in their candidate journey. So some people might be really early in their process for orientation towards a new job. we would, target those people much more with awareness content that's really general information about the company or what they're working on. Whereas people that have interacted a few times, so, if people have been to the website a number of times or have interacted with some social content, we show those people other content based on where they are in their journey and how much interaction they have shown in the past. Until they sort of went through the whole AIDA funnel, or whichever funnel you want to use in that case, and are ready to apply. So basically what we're doing is we're constantly building talent pools of talent that is interested in the client, and keep that talent pool warm with content that's based on, where they are in their journey. Our mission is basically to reduce time to hire to zero by enabling companies to interact with all the talent that's relevant for them.
And how do you, so does that, presumably that, does that lead to some people applying, or does it lead to, and it leads to some conversation starting between, a recruiter and a candidate?
Yeah, so it depends on where the company is right now, right? So we have a lot of clients that still really want the traditional application with a cover letter and a CV. But we also have a lot of clients now that we're bringing them in contact with candidates in a really early stage of their orientation process for a new job. So it's becoming more and more a conversation in the early stages by using conversational marketing, for example. So to give you a concrete example of how that will work, we would, for example, advertise a video of a company on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. And from that video, rather than sending people to the website, to the career page of the client, they can actually talk to the client directly via WhatsApp and be in touch with a recruiter to ask some in-depth questions. It could also work, for example, if we're targeting, let's say, IT people, developers, for example, that they can talk to a fellow developer that actually works at the company that is advertising, to sort of find out how are they working are they working agile, how are they working in teams, what systems are they using, stuff like that, because that is what those people really are looking for if they're would ever consider switching over to your company.
Do you, yeah, and I want to kind of dig into the specifics of how you do it, and how it works, and what you've learned, and sort of things that you can share that will be of use to those joining us. But do you think in kind of that it all has to end in an application, or do you think that is becoming less and less important? Do you think that if you're able to get a conversation going with a software developer, or with whoever the candidate profile might be, if you're able to get that conversation going between the candidate and the recruiter or somebody in the company, that it doesn't necessarily have to lead to an application from there? That can be the starting point. Yeah,
definitely. So I think we're moving from sort of an application based system within recruitment to much more of a lead generation based system. So getting to talk to people as early as possible is really important. And I think if you look at how people use the internet nowadays, it's mostly mobile. And if you look at desktop was built around search, right? So it all revolves around Google. If you look at what we do on our mobile phones, it all revolves around chat. So this means that to get into the sort of world that your candidates are living in, you will need to start having a direct conversation with them through the apps that they use most of the day. So that will be WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and I definitely believe, and we see that works with clients that we've been working for a long time, is that rather than just getting that conversation bottom funnel, if sort of a match is developed through direct conversation during the whole candidate journey, then companies actually have way less mishires than they would have if they just have a selection process where they talk to a candidate once or twice and then hire them based on that, rather than having a whole conversation and sort of slowly getting to that match through a real conversation with the recruiter.
We would talk about. We would always talk about things that you do top of the funnel, kind of middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So top of the funnel is all about awareness and initial kind of attraction and that initial engagement. Middle of the funnel is where you can see that people are, candidates are interested. They're interested in the organization. They're interested in, they kind of are learning that, this would be a good move for me. I could see myself working there. I like the culture, and then more towards bottom of the funnel, where they start to look at career progression, and they start to look at specific opportunities, and so they look as though that they are what we would call as hire ready, or ready for a kind of hiring conversation. And so being able to understand what stage people are at in the candidate journey is really important, because that kind of drives what it is that you look to do next to move the conversation forward.
And I think that fundamentally changes the role a recruiter has as well, because obviously a recruiter used to be much more of somebody that selects people from the pool that has actually applied, whereas now it becomes much more of a sales role, where they get in touch with candidates in an early stage of their orientation process and sort of have to slowly sell the company to get them to actually apply and see the match. That really changes the whole recruitment process for companies as well.
In terms of in terms of having these kind of conversations, conversational marketing on the mobile, using different apps, that sounds fairly manual, and in terms of nurturing and managing that relationship, that sounds fairly manual. And so therefore an individual recruiter is going to be kind of limited in the number of people that they could actually be doing that with, and staying on top of it and doing it properly. How, what's your experience of that?
Well, that's a part of what we offer companies as a service, is that we automate the whole candidate journey for them. So basically, we make sure that they get served the right content at the right time, and we also automate the process of them being the thing that happens is that instead of your sourcing, your outbound sourcing as a company, you actually get inbound leads that you can then contact. So the whole the idea of sourcing from a company perspective is normally a really manual process, because you have to actually start reaching out to people on LinkedIn and via email and cold calling them, whereas we sort of turn that process around with the services that we offer by generating interest from the target audience, and then once they think, okay, this is interesting, let's have a conversation, enabling those people to actually get talk to the recruiters directly via WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. And that way companies get inbound leads rather than having to spend a lot of time doing outbound. And that is less of a manual process, because they can find these leads within our system and see the history that they've had in being in touch with the company.
Yeah, I think that your approach is almost identical to ours. It's just that ours would be more kind of omnichannel across, both email or all different, social media, Messenger, we at LinkedIn, whatever. We always talk to people about just keep doing what you're doing. Keep trying to engage with candidates in the channels that they're active in, and the other different channels, but use technology that's going to enable you to capture everything that everybody is doing, so that you can obviously some people are going to go on and apply. Some people are going to respond directly, but a huge amount of people will engage with what you've been sharing with them and go off and read and learn and study, and you need to be able to see that so that you can then progress the people that need. Oh, no, sorry, that's at the door. You need to progress people through the different stages, but also follow up the ones that are looking as though they're ready for a hiring conversation right now.
Yeah.
So give me some examples. Like if you pick a couple of an example client where what would you what the kind of like an example of what you would do around the initial kind of reach out, that attraction and interest, and then what you might do to kind of nurture and progress the conversations.
Yeah. So what we see on average is that candidates that people are companies are trying to hire, obviously depending on which area of expertise they have, but people need somewhere between 20 and 50 touch points before they're actually ready to apply. Right. So what we make sure is that, for example, if I take an example, we work with a large construction company here in the Netherlands. They've started working with us about 3 years ago, what they generally do is they have a lot of like top funnel. They have the highest variety in content. So we would start, they are looking for a lot of specific roles within the construction business. So we would start with targeting all those people of the whole target audience with various forms of awareness content. And based on which video they like, or which video they look at, or which blog they like, they get sent to a different web page that belongs to the career page of the customer. And based on their actual behavior on the web page, we then retarget them with different content a bit lower in the funnel. And for example, if they find one project on the career page really interesting, we will retarget them with a blog that's about that specific project. If they then read that blog again, we would then, for example, retarget them with all the job openings that correspond with that specific project. And that way, you really build a personalized journey based on the sort of roles you're trying to hire people for.
If you stick with a construction company and the different types of roles that you're hiring for, how do you find the roles dictate which social media channel you use?
Mm-hmm. So it actually, going through the years, a few years ago, it was a lot more divided up by per social media network. Now it's much more a general, like almost everybody uses Facebook nowadays. If you look at LinkedIn, it's mostly obviously academic people. It's like from the so blue collar a bit less on LinkedIn, although we see better and better results in that area as well on LinkedIn. If you look at the thing that's coming up the quickest is actually Instagram. Instagram is, a few years ago, it was really for the young audience. So between, let's say, 23 and 33, mid 30s. But now you can really see, people from until 45, we see Instagram really generating really good results. And I think one of the most underestimated channels that people are not using is YouTube, because you can target really well on YouTube based on the videos that people are watching. So as an example, you could, if you're looking for a Java developer, for example, you could choose to run a pre-roll ad before a Java instruction video that advertises something that has to do with your company looking for Java developers. Then you're 100% sure that you're actually reaching the right people at that stage. So those are some of but YouTube is really broad as well. So basically for all audiences. And then you have some specialized ones for developers mainly.
And so when you're engaged, when you're engaging as you move through the kind of different stages, are you engaging on behalf of an individual, or are you engaging kind of like from the company itself? Who's it coming from?
Most of the time from the company itself. So once they come inbound to actually start a conversation via chat, they always talk to a recruiter, and a recruiter then takes over sort of the personal side of things, and we're really advertising from the actual company itself. Yeah.
And what do you talk to us about? Talk to us about data and metrics and and conversion, and then let's talk about kind of best practice. We'll talk a lot about best practice from a talent lead generation point of view, and all the different things that you can do to drive conversion. Let's talk about kind of the data and the metrics. And
yeah, very important. I think a lot of companies, it's hard for companies to find the right metrics for themselves. Most of the time we find that with our clients. So what happens very often is that they primarily look at applications as the only metric that they're following. But if you do that, you miss a lot of nuances in how you are building your employer brand, and how you are engaging with candidates. So for example, if you would only look at, if you're a sales manager and you only look at output in how many deals you actually closed this month, you might not see that your USPs are not working in the marketing department anymore, and you're not getting any new leads in. This month might be good, but then in 3 months' time you won't have any more business. And it's the same for recruitment. So what we do with our clients when we start out is that we set a framework of KPIs that sort of define the success of the campaigns that they're going to run. And those statistics are obviously, conversion and applications is part of that. But we also look at, how many people are we reaching? How often are we reaching them? But also, are they visiting the website? Are they coming back by themselves without us actually retargeting them? Are they staying? Are they reading your content? Are they scrolling down once they're on the page? Are they watching your video? Are they sharing your content? Are they liking your content? Those are all indicators for the success of how much you're generating an employer brand out there, and how much of a connection you're actually making to the target audience.
And if you were to, when you start with a client, give us kind of some typical KPIs that you would track against in terms of conversion data, and then give us some kind of example kind of ROI and that you've experienced.
Yeah, so it varies obviously, because for some companies you're just targeting one specific role of many roles that they're doing. But generally, if we take the whole all of their job openings that they have, we would see ROI would start always with more website visits, right? So that sometimes increases 100% or 140% during the actual campaign phase. And those translate later on once you're building more and more interest. So basically in the awareness phase, we would look at video plays. That's a really important thing there, because most of the time you start out with video campaigns, because that engages the candidates the best in these days, and the actual website visits. So at a later stage, so sort of mid-funnel, you would look much more at, okay, are these people coming back? So do we get returning visitors, and are they looking at more pages on our website? Am I getting extra followers on social media? And are they mentioning me more? And then bottom funnel, we would look at started applications against finished applications, because that's always, most of the companies have a big drop off there, depending on how they have their application process developed. So if they have a bad mobile experience, for example, they may only have, they may have 100 people starting an application, but only 20 finishing it. So that's sort of a sign that they need to work on their application forms. And we would also look at generated leads. So actual people that came out of anonymity to reach out, not actually applying, but to reach out to see, if they can ask a few questions that go into depth of what the company is doing.
What kind of, in your experience, in a typical, campaign would be I'm really interested in this relationship, this ratio between applications. Let's just assume that, there's 1,000 people in the pool, or that's the total addressable talent market, if you like, that you'd like to talk to, if only you get the chance, and you engage them with a campaign like this. Mm-hmm. What percentage do you think would end up applying, and which percentage do you think would surface as leads, in the sense that they had engaged or replied back to you?
Yeah.
And then what other percentage would have demonstrated all of the behaviors such that they would be ready for a conversation if the recruiters could see that and could follow up? What would those 3 percentages be?
Yeah, so generally we reach about 90% of the target audience that we're trying to actually hire. And then, applications vary between 1 and 3% most of the time. But we get interactions from, interactions like, interacting with the campaigns of, up to 70% of the target audience reacting to the campaign in any way. And then, very often about 20 to 30% is actually willing to start a conversation, which obviously, if you're looking at 90% of your target audience, that's a big chunk of the people that you're reaching and that you want to convert.
Yeah, I would say that tallies with our experience, is that applications aren't going to get you where you need to go, and they will. They're almost always of a lower quality, and so it's actually that group of people that are either the 20 to 30% that are either engaging with you and responding back to you, or will take a call or will respond to an email if you follow up with them directly, are the most important group. Yeah. And give us a kind of. Firstly, we've got a few minutes left. Doesn't matter if we kind of run over, the 40, 45 minutes. So I'd like to, if people have got questions, just put them in the Q&A box, and then I'll pose them to Mees before we finish. But talk to us about, specific roles that you see this works amazingly well for, and ones that that absolutely doesn't work at all for. You've had it's very challenging. Mm-hmm. And then talk to us about the type of content that you think works really, really well, and how you kind of develop it at the start to get that initial kind of spark going.
Mm-hmm. So what we see is that it like the conversational bit, it really works well across the board. But the most interesting conversations come from when, for example, we're working with a large insurance company in the Netherlands, and they are trying to hire developers, but they're not known as a standard sort of company that hires developers. They're not known as an IT company. So from that, what we see is that they had a lot of trouble generating applications, but generating leads into incoming conversations is a lot higher than we see at other companies. And that's just because they have piqued the interest of developers, but they're sort of wary about actually taking the next step, because they're thinking, well, this is not really an employer that has a IT background. So are they really using the newest technologies and the newest methods and everything? So for those kinds of target audiences, it's really interesting. But we also see for electricians, stuff like that, we see it working really well as well, because very often these people don't have LinkedIn profiles. Sometimes they don't have a CV, but they are really willing to apply, but they just need to get the process to actually do that, and to take that step is a lot less of a barrier when they get the chance to talk to people.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I've got a question here around. First, the other one is, as well, as I wanted to wish Christian Froelich, it's his birthday today, and so happy birthday, Christian.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I hope you're celebrating as much as you can. And I've got a question here from Hugh Flint around, first, so a couple of questions. How does it scale? Okay. And how does it sort of fit and integrate with the more kind of the current sort of traditional route with, ATS, and then description and then posted to job boards? How does it sync in with with the current process and the ATS?
So and that's the scaling question as well, or?
No, two questions. Let's do the ATS integration one first.
Okay, so what we do is we integrate with a lot of ATSs, and we do it in a way that once somebody comes out of anonymity and actually opts in, you obviously have to pose the question with GDPR. Are we allowed to save your data and to get back to you at a later stage? Once they have that opt-in, then we shoot the data of that person into the ATS or the CRM, depending on what system somebody's using. And the other way around, like when we advertise jobs, people can really easily send us an XML from the ATS and activate all their jobs from the ATS directly to our system.
Excellent. And then, around just a few pointers on how it scales.
Yeah, just to see in what way would scale?
Well, I guess as it scales, okay, where do the bottlenecks typically happen?
Okay, so if we're looking at the conversational recruitment bit, is that where you get a bottleneck is if you get too many inbound leads at some point, which is obviously a luxury in these times. Then you have to be aware of people that they're in these times they are expecting an answer if they pose a question on a chat app. They are expecting an answer within at least 24 hours. So companies have to be aware that this sort of changes the role of a recruiter, and at the back end of people reacting to inbound leads is really important. I think scaling from reach, it's really easy because the technology does that for you. So the number of people you're reaching and the number of people that you're engaging within your campaigns can be automated through services like ours, for example.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about this question come in from Rob around, obviously you need to target content to different kind of demographics, but how have you, what have you seen works best with millennials, for example? Obviously it's mobile and it's kind of in-app and that all, but what about specific content that you've noticed that is more engaging for millennials?
Yeah. So what we see with millennials is that they have a really short attention span. So what you see if you're from a technical standpoint, if you're running with a video, you have to make that video really interesting, especially the first 3 seconds, to keep people engaged, right? And then from 15 seconds, we see a massive drop-off point in view-through finishes. So millennials are not really able to are willing to watch a video for, let's say, 15 seconds or longer. With in terms of content, what they're really looking for is cultural aspects of the company, the actual job that they would, if it's going to be fulfilling for them, flexibility. So all the stuff that you can sort of communicate on that front really resonates with millennials in general terms.
And do you work with the clients that you work with? Do you take their content, or do you help them in terms of content generation? Do you actually generate content with them?
Yeah, no, we don't. We are we're basically the nerds that get the content out to the right people, and we let the creative side of things mostly to the companies themselves, or to a creative agency. We work with a lot of creative agencies to get the content out, to get the content created. What we can do is really give companies advice based on the data that we've had, that we've seen through campaigns over the past years. Like,
Yeah.
for example, the first 3 seconds of a video being really important, subtitling your video, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. I've got a couple of questions here which are kind of in the same area as well. So obviously COVID-19, has, I mean, the most of the market is just, hiring freeze, lots of people, lots of candidates have been made redundant. Do you think that this is just the current situation, or do you think the current situation will change the way that recruitment is going to be done in the future?
Oh man, that's a difficult question. Obviously, I'm thinking about this a lot. So, like it has impact. We see across the board. We see. Let's just take the situation as it is right now. So across the board, we see a lot of impact with our companies, with our clients right now. There are a few sort of sectors that keep running, pharma, healthcare, but also, for example, energy providers. People still need energy, so they keep going, and but those are only the government agencies. Those are the sort of sectors that keep going. I think. It's really hard to predict if we're getting in a structural downturn or not. I do think that recruitment will have been changed forever by the entrance of social media, and I don't think that if we're getting into a market where companies once again get more applications than they actually need, which is the other way around of what the actual situation was before Corona. I don't think that the behavior of people that are looking for a job is going to change, because the world has fundamentally changed with the social media and direct communication. So I do think that candidates will still be looking for a job that where they feel the cultural fit, where they feel that the job that they are doing really matters, and that they're still expecting the information to come to them rather than them having to actively apply. I think it will remain really important for companies to work on their employer brands and to get their employer brand out there to continue to hire the best talent, because obviously you want the best talent for the job, and not just people that are only actively applying because they found your job while actively searching. So I think that will definitely stay a factor, even if we get into a labor market that's where there's more applicants.
Yeah, I think that we talk a bit about a lot about this is just going to accelerate the kind of necessary digital transformation for talent acquisition. Organizations are still going to have to be, great at, driving awareness and initial interest, and, across all, lots of different channels, but most importantly going forward, social media, with the people that they want to talk to. They're going to have to, be able to build, relationships with them, over time in across all the different channels. And they're going to, they are, they're not, applications, relying on applications is not gonna get you where you need to go. You end up hiring. You can hire the best of the people that apply to you, or you can hire, look to hire the best of the people that are out there. So
yeah.
And one last point, which I think is very kind of, which would be something that everybody's probably struggling with at the moment, which is how do you continue to market yourself? How do you continue to keep those pipelines active today, but in a way that's doesn't come across as being self-serving? You see, some of the best marketing that's out there doesn't talk about the crisis,
Mm-hmm.
but the messages that it's giving are on the basis that we're in this crisis. So how would you, what in terms of the conversations that you're having, with your customers, how are you recommending that they continue to kind of like engage and communicate with their candidates?
Yeah. So what we see in the data right now is that applications are going down for companies. Leads are going down. So people, in times of crisis, they choose to remain where they are and sort of to be in a safe environment. But what we do see is that the actual reach of the campaigns is about 50% higher since Corona started, because obviously people are active on social media, on Google more. They're more online than they were when everybody was just working as normal. So what we work with our companies is how to keep creating a sort of a top of mind position and generate awareness at this time, because the reach is higher. But obviously you have to be careful with messaging, because it can be a touchy subject for a lot of people, obviously. We give the advice to not sort of deny that the crisis is there, but also not actually use the crisis, the corona crisis, as a sort of way to hire extra people or to get more applicants in the door. It's just about acknowledging that we're in the situation that we're in, but your company doesn't stop, and you still need the candidates to come in. So I think everybody will understand that you're still marketing yourself out there.
That's great. Look, Mees, have you got anything, any closing kind of sentiments or anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, I think it's really important that companies look at the worlds that their candidates are living in, and the world that their candidates are living in is this, are the social media channels and WhatsApp and Messenger, and we're really moving from an application economy sort of to a lead generation system within recruitment. And as a company, if you use that to your advantage right now, you're still one of the early adopters, and you can really generate a lot of interest and hire better people that stay longer at your company and are a better fit. And I think that's what we're all looking for ultimately.
Brilliant. Hey, Mees, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. And I'll make sure, I think we had about 55 attended. We had about 270 odd who signed up. So we'll make sure that we get the on-demand version out to everybody else. And look, thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll get this out to you as soon as we can turn it around. Mees, have a great day. And
you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure.